Yeah. Proverbs 3, part 2.4.
87-52 blue.
So are we going?
We are going.
I guess so. I almost need to get my flashlight out because
Is it that bad?
either that or my eyesight is.
Well, you probably do need glasses.
And
You
now,
probably just need a head transplant.
yeah, that'd probably help everybody. Well, hello and welcome to the WordLover podcast. This is where we have theology meet everyday life by asking genuine questions. And now we are going through the book of Proverbs, and thankfully we have Josh Bunner back here with us in studio.
Yay!
Yay!
Wow, look how loud we all are today because we're so excited.
Yeah, excited about a new studio. It's the Bunnerden Studios. Bunnerden Studios.
Okay, well, we can run with that.
Yeah, we'll see about that. But as I said,
I've been away for so long. Tell me what we.
it seems like you've been gone for almost 2 months, but I think it's only been a week or so that since we've done the last podcast.
What did you cover?
Not much.
Why is that?
I don't know. I guess I might get sidetracked on little bits of information and we start talking about it. But we started chapter 3 the last time.
Wait, you say we? Was there somebody talking to you?
Well, the audience and the people who are listening. I mean, no,
see.
of course you were not with me. You were off sunning in Florida.
Sunning. That's what you need to do.
Sun tanning in Florida. But now we started chapter 3. I started going through chapter 3 on the podcast.
I see.
Yeah, and we made it through verse 12, sort of.
That's great.
Yeah.
That is really good.
We only have, like 37 more verses to go. No, there's 35 verses in the chapter, and we made it through 12 of them. But so I would at least like to get through the first, 6 of the next section.
That's kind of ambitious, isn't it?
I think it might be.
Six whole verses?
Six whole verses, but we probably get through a bunch of it because I got doodles everywhere.
Can it be done?
Yeah, I think it can. But we're going to continue on in Proverbs in the pursuit of wisdom, and we're going to pick it up in verse 13 of chapter 3. Are you there?
Oh, I'm here.
Are you? Can I flash my light over there?
Flash your light.
But blessed is the man who finds wisdom, the man who gains understanding. For she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand. In her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Those who lay hold of her will be blessed. That's some very nice sounding passages right there. Verses.
It is very nice.
Would you like to we want to dive into them right now or continue reading?
Well, if we dive into them now, this is a trick question, isn't it? If we dive into them now, we're not going to finish. Whereas if we read all of them, you'll forget about things. Maybe we should read all of them.
Okay. Well, you pick it up from verse 19.
Well, by wisdom the Lord laid the earth's foundations. By understanding he set the heavens in place. By his knowledge the watery depths were divided, and the clouds let drop the dew. Well, we need to stop and talk about that one now.
Oh, why did you Oh, come on. Well,
my son, do not let wisdom and understanding out of your sight. Preserve sound judgment and discretion. They will be life for you, an ornament to grace your neck. Then you will go on your way in safety, and your foot will not stumble. When you lie down, you will not be afraid, and when you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. Have no fear of sudden disaster or of the ruin that overtakes the wicked, for the Lord will be at your side and will keep your foot from being snared.
do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it is in your power to act. Do not say to your neighbor, come back later, I'll give it tomorrow, when you have it with you now. Do not plot harm against your neighbor who lives trustfully near you. Do not accuse a man for no reason, when he has done you no harm. Do not envy a violent man or choose any of his ways. For the Lord detests a perverse man, but takes the upright into his confidence. The Lord's curse is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the home of the righteous. He mocks proud mockers, but gives grace to the humble. The wise inherit honor, but fools he upholds to shame. Holds up to shame.
It's been really good, folks. That's going to wrap it up for this week.
It was kind of quick. You're really hoping I was going to forget a lot of this stuff, but that'd have been almost too much stuff to forget there.
That's a lot.
Besides, I told you I have a lot of notes, a lot of doodles.
Doodles?
Yeah, doodles in the
All
pages right here.
Where do you want to start at?
Well, I'd like to start back up there in verses 13 through 18.
Let's do it.
All right. If you notice, something that stood out to me as I was reading this earlier was that 13 and 18 almost encapsulate a whole idea in itself. And I went back and said, well, this is interesting to me. So I went back to the Hebrew text and I noticed that it actually set this whole thing aside by the same markings it does in Psalms sometimes. With that, if you read in your Bibles, sometimes it has that little just a little symbol off to the edge or something like that, showing you a break or a pause.
Yes.
Well, in a lot of the Hebrew text itself, you have the verses identified by certain markings, but then you'll have complete thoughts marked off with the 15th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the pei, off to the side, saying that this is a complete thought. And you see this actually right here after verse 18. You have that setting this aside. But it doesn't start at verse 13. It actually starts at verse 11.
Oh.
So the pei right before that one I told you in verse 18 happens to come after verse 10. So it signifies you as you're reading the text that 11 through 18 would go together as a thought. And I thought that was interesting. But for the biggest part, for 13 starts it off with blessed, and 18 ends it with blessed. In the King James Bibles, it actually says happy, which isn't a bad translation of that, because that's what it means. It's speaking about happiness. But he's saying that happy is the man who finds wisdom and the man who gains understanding. In the actual the language of that verse right there, the wisdom is already attained and the understanding is being pursued. Because it's like a verb tense saying that the wisdom is being held and the understanding is being drawn out. And we can see that idea that where does wisdom come from? It comes from the Lord. James says that if anybody lacks wisdom...
James says.
Yeah, James says.
Just in case you guys missed that.
Yeah, we reference that book a lot.
Yeah.
not for any selfish reasons or nothing, but...
Mm-hmm.
But he says that anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives it generously to anyone without showing favoritism. And we see that the wisdom is a gift from God, but it's not just the point about having wisdom. It's about what are you going to do with it. And he's saying that you're happy if you find wisdom, if you have it, but you're also the happier still if you actually gain the understanding from it.
Let me ask you about the contrast in Ecclesiastes 1. It says, "For with much wisdom comes much sorrow." How do you balance that out?
That sounds like two contradictory terms, but I would suggest that the context is not the same thing as he's speaking about wisdom. He's speaking about the knowledge or the understanding from God, but one of them is seeing you could say that the travesties and everything around us, and how just knowing that we live in a fallen world, and no matter how hard you try, I mean, you can change some things, but until the Lord comes back, he's even promised in his word that the wicked is going to continue getting more wicked. It's going to continue to getting harder. But we should stand fast in the Lord. So I could see how that could bring much sorrow, because you know the good that should be done, and it breaks your heart because
I can understand
you would hope more people would be doing that, and that doesn't seem to happen. But here, the wisdom brings happiness, is because we understand that that our Creator created us in a particular way to live, and when we fall in line with that, we're living according to the intended nature, so that we would find a truer happiness than just pursuing little desires and whims.
Well, that's kind of one of the old pictures in my head is when I try to explain it to people that don't really follow the Bible, is that you can ride a bike the way that it was designed and you might get where you're going, but if you do it the way that, the way that the engineer made it to be, work it the way it's supposed to be rode,
Yeah.
you're going to get farther. It's going to be more comfortable, and you're probably going to even enjoy it.
Yeah, if you use the proper bike for the proper terrain.
Well, I'm just saying, for some reason, I'm picturing you put together the bike and you got all the parts, but you're missing the seat. So that's gonna. That's not good.
Where's the bathroom? I have to go to the bathroom.
But another interesting thing that
Go up the hallway, and it's the second door on the left.
another interesting that stood out to me. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's in this passage, because it's almost like a poem. It starts it off with a thought, and then it ends with that same thought. And the next thought it brings up second, it actually ends with that thought right before the last one too. It's almost like when you bring up a certain topic, and then you bring your discussion to a conclusion by reiterating the same thing, and it's actually I think beautifully written. But these passages are actually the promise or the drawing out of the happiness that comes from living according to God's way, or finding wisdom. But it's in the context of verses 11 and 12. And if we skip back to them,
We already covered them twice.
no, not today, we didn't.
Okay.
But it says, "My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, as a father the son he delights in." You see, this context of a man who finds, or who is happy because he has wisdom, and then it drawing out the understanding, it's all within this mindset that it's through the discipline and the rebuke of the Lord. So don't despise that. That's how the Lord teaches us, and he conforms us to the image of his son, which is what teaches us wisdom. And as we dwell upon that, we are doing what this verse is implying, that not only do you have wisdom, but you're drawing out the understanding of it.
Well, since you said a lot of words, I want to say something now.
Go ahead.
I always thought it was, whenever you think discipline, you think like a physical punishment. And something I looked up a while ago, and discipline is something for the future, while punishment is something for right now. Does that sound about right?
Well, I guess that's why we say we discipline our children. We use forms of punishment for the temporary, the physical things that are going on, but we want to teach them lifelong lessons through that. So
right.
Discipline, that's a good nugget there.
That's all I got.
But
I'm fascinated by the tree of life, though. What is that supposed to mean there? Do you have anything on that?
I was going to get to that too.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're
for
jumping the gun.
yeah.
Jumping the gun. But no, I was also going to point out that if you skip down to the later to the end of the book, almost, when it talks about that it's the glory of God to conceal things, and it's the glory of kings to search them out. And he's touching on this in verse 13, when he's talking about that God gives you the wisdom, but that's his understanding, is his knowledge. And he wants you to spend the time to cultivate that relationship with him, to draw out the understanding, to memorize and search his word intently, not just say, hey, I read my one verse for the day, and
No, you go to your studies.
You
right?
thumb through the book and put your finger down and say, hey, it's my daily verse. No, it's having a more of an in-depth relationship that brings out the understanding. And
But there's so much in there. I mean, the way that you can break down one verse and look at it through the Hebrew, or try to look at it from the cultural perspective of when it was written. And
yeah, this is deep. We can probably spend the next 4 weeks on it.
Well, I know that you could spend 4 years on it, but that's a lot of doodles.
Yes, a lot of. I don't think I could fit that many doodles in my margins here. But the next verse says, "For she is more profitable than silver, and yields more returns than gold." And that's the one I want to bring up too, because how it just says, verse 13 says that happy or blessed is the man who has this, verse 18 says that those who lay hold of her will be blessed or remain happy. He says that wisdom is profitable and it brings forth yields. And then he ends this little segment by saying that she is similar to a tree of life. And Christ is likened to a tree of life as well. And what else is a tree is a resemblance in the New Testament in the fruit that the Spirit bears forth. And as this vine and everything else, this picture of garden and growing plants and stuff like that. But it's being fruitful, having a fertile soil. The beginning of Psalms, and it says that we'll be a tree planted by the rivers and whose leaf never withers. When he's saying that this is going to be an unending, productive venue that you will actually be blessed to have, rather than the like the aimless searches of gold and silver that people are so busy clamoring after. You could be as rich as you want, but you ain't taking it with you when you go.
Well, when you get wisdom, you get rich too, right? Does that mean like your investment, like your stocks and stuff?
In heaven?
Well, I mean, all around, right?
Well, I mean, if you're blessed in the
how can wisdom be precious? What does that even mean?
Well, precious is something that you hold dear, and wisdom, if it's the understanding and knowledge given from God. If it's precious to you, just like silver and gold, it's something that you hold dear and valuable, that you're willing to give up a lot of things for. In fact, in chapter 4, we'll actually skip over there too.
It's something that you would sell everything for.
Verse 7. No, well, it said, "Wisdom is supreme; therefore get wisdom. Though it costs all you have, get understanding." And he's constantly tying these two things together. It's not just wisdom; it's getting to know the thoughts after God. It's like who was it? Was it Galileo who said that science is like thinking God's thoughts after him? It was either Galileo or one of those.
They don't really use that quote much anymore.
No, they probably don't. But that's exactly what science is. It's thinking God's thoughts after him. And but if it's something that you value or treasure, you're willing to give up certain you could say pleasures or commodities of this world to be able to have a little bit more of that intimate relationship with him. And then moving on, it says that she's more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Every time I read that, I think of that song.
Ruby, don't take your love to town.
No, it's a you could say it's a worship hymn about nothing you desire compares to Jesus. Not necessarily that words, but it says I can't really sing it. But.
Yeah, oh, thank you.
Hey, you're welcome, audience. I won't try to do that. But
you don't even know how lucky.
But there is, every time I read that, there is a worship song playing in my head at least. But I think that's good. I think that's one thing that does help cause peace and you can say tranquility in some of the roughest times in life. Is that you can just sit back and worship God.
Well, that is wisdom. I mean, if you're wise enough to know that God has it all worked out anyway, there's not really that worry there anymore.
Yeah. But I thought another nugget that I drew out from this when I was
I see a tree and rubies. I don't see any nuggets.
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
Oh.
It's rubies.
Oh.
A lot of translations translate that as precious stones, but the actual Hebrew word can be more likened to coral or even pearls.
Oh.
And none of that's still nuggets, but pearls stands out to me because there's a parable that Jesus talks about how this man found this pearl of great price, and then he put it back and he sold everything he had to go attain that one pearl. And the same thing with the treasure. And if you stop and think about it just somewhat, you can see what Jesus was actually picturing there was the same thing that the author of Proverbs was writing here. The pearl of great price, the treasure beyond all compare.
Is that from the Book of Mormon?
No, I think that's where they robbed their name off of that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Off that one.
But the more truth is in it, the more believable it is, right?
Well,
more people are going to go with it.
As long as there's a nugget of truth in it, people are going to believe certain things. It just depends on how much of how much legwork you put in it for yourself to
Well,
study
you think about if it's
what's
not
right or wrong.
95% of it's true, and that last 5%, you're just gonna kind of ignore that, maybe.
I think that's what a lot of times we do that. We find things that are mostly true and it fits a lot of what we read in Scripture, but then this one little thing that's wrong, we kind of turn a blind eye to. Generally, I believe is because we don't want people to look at the little things that we're trying to cover up and hide. And we excuse a little bit of mistruth because we want people to excuse our little bit of mistruth, as long as we get the majority of it right, which is still wrong. I think we ought to be pursuing wisdom a little bit more
But what if
sincere than
what
that.
if you're just ignorant?
If you're ignorant of that fact, I think that would be your own fault because.
That's why you seek wisdom. I tied it right back in. I am a genius.
But anyhow, that was the ruby's nothing you desire compares with her. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. And then there's a lot of significance there with the left and right hand, but we'll try to move on. I mean, I don't want to bog this way down, but and that she is a tree of life to those who embrace her. The Septuagint there actually uses the Greek word zoe for life.
Zoe girl.
So, hey, they're actually pretty. My girls like them. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. But in the Hebrew, it's chaya. It's the tree of living or the tree of life. And like I said, the Greek and the Septuagint would say zoe, which is what Christ says, that he is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the zoe.
what about ZAO? What does that mean?
Z-A-O, Zao.
Yeah, is that something?
It may. I would have to look that up.
Well, you're the Hebrew scholar here. I mean, what?
I would have to look it up. I don't know.
Very disappointing.
I wish I had my computer in front of me.
Well, you could bring it.
I don't have a laptop.
Oh,
But it says that she's a tree of life to all those who embrace her, and there again, he's using the same type of terminology as he started with in verse 13. The embracing is something that you have to do continually, and those who lay hold of her will be blessed. And that lay hold of her is actually past, and it's something that you've done. And it's just like the wisdom that God gives you is yours. It's there because God is always with you, but you still have to do the legwork to go and to draw out the understanding. And just like the laying hold of her, you're blessed because their happiness actually rests in the identity of God. And the tree of life is something that's always blooming up in front of you. It reminds me of Jesus likening it to a fountain of living water, that when you have him living on the inside, it's something that's always, it's a perpetual ongoing activity inside. I thought that these verses themselves, I mean, that is an amazing amount of stuff just packed in that little passage right there.
well, it's not even like we broke down, or rather, you broke down all the other ones, but there's a collective thought there too. That's a really cool. I would never have known that
About
because
the
I don't have that. I'm not that wise.
well, the wisdom is there for the taking. But the final thing that I want to touch on, just a little bit, let me chase this one rabbit, just this one time,
All right, go ahead.
one
Go for
time
it.
for this section. There's many sections to come.
We're gonna
but,
be here for 3
anyhow,
hours.
But another thing I want to say is that it is kind of interesting to me how the Old English translates this as happy is the man, and a lot of times today we want to distinguish between happiness and joy. But our Declaration of Independence says that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Not joy.
It wasn't joy. They used the term happiness. So it intrigues me a little bit because I wonder if we are actually just like misunderstanding a lot of the stuff that has been handed down to us in our nation. Like just as that, so that unalienable right that we have to pursue happiness. And we have today in our mindset, we oftentimes think of fleeting, momentary, like pleasures that make us happy in the moment.
The definition has been diluted down through.
I think it's been extremely diluted, because Webster's 1828 dictionary, he ties happiness as in not only being momentary pleasures of like desires and stuff, but also something that is for you could say a larger, far-reaching goal of a lasting happiness. And he actually ends his definition of happiness by saying that true, lasting happiness will never be found in this side of in this life.
Well, that makes
He's
sense,
pointing to an eternity,
Right.
because the only way to truly be happy, and he goes on to define happy. And that's one thing I wish I either wrote down or pulled up, but he defines happy as being essentially holding on to that what is good to yourself or to other people, but that he quotes as a reinforcement of that the Psalms by saying, happy or blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. And that is the whole foundation of our unalienable right. The happiness that we're pursuing is to be God, just as the wisdom here is portrayed as actually bringing happiness.
But do you actually need the freedom from a nation, like the permission of a nation to say, I'm going to follow God?
You see, I think that's another mischaracterization of our Bill of Rights or the declaration that we have inalienable rights. It's not their permission. They're just recognizing the fact that we have these rights as human beings. We don't need their permission to have that.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. So is it like just another statement? Like, okay, you know that. Well, how does that affect me? That statement from
About in the declaration?
yeah. I mean, I know that, right?
Well, then you should be
Tell me what I need to do.
well, you should be getting behind the
Gun,
idea
more
that
gun laws.
that's a totally different
Wait,
topic.
rabbit, you said rabbit hole.
No,
so
we don't need no rabbit holes. We're just chasing rabbits. But no, I think that the significance behind that should be is that we should all be getting behind the idea that government isn't there to tell us what to do, but to protect each individual to live out their unalienable rights. So
how can you get ugly with somebody that is trying to do that?
who's doing that?
Like the LGBT.
Well, they're not. So that's what I'm saying. They're not doing it in the intention of when it was written. We're taking it and misconstruing the meaning of it so that we can justify momentary pleasures that might bring a fleeting happiness, but it's not the happiness that was intended by the original documents.
Or
That's
intended by the document or intended by God?
intended by God and by the people who penned the original documents. The intention of putting that in there. It wasn't that you can just chase your momentary fleeting happiness, but it was for an ultimate prosperity or posterity that it's not only about you, but about everybody else around you.
But if you ever said that to anybody that believes their happiness is their happiness, like you can't tell somebody.
Well, that's why we started this whole thing off. And I told you that we, in today's mindset, we have actually gotten that far off track.
I just wanted to make sure you weren't flip flopping. I know how you are sometimes.
I wasn't flip flopping. Well, moving on.
We need to keep going here.
Yes, we do. Well, we made it through verse 18, and that is applause worthy.
Yeah, I would clap, but I'm trying to see what we're doing next here.
Verse 19 and 20.
By wisdom the Lord laid the earth's foundations. By understanding he set the heavens in place. By his knowledge the watery depths were divided, and the clouds let drop the dew. Is that a Mountain Dew commercial in the Bible?
I think it was. Maybe that's where they got it from.
Code Red.
Code Red. But what stands out to you in those two passages, in those two verses?
Wisdom. Wisdom created everything.
But see, it's not just wisdom. He actually brings up three different words or uses three different terms here: wisdom, understanding, and knowledge.
Buckle your seatbelts. Go ahead.
I'm asking you because it seems like he most of the time is talking about wisdom and personifying wisdom as a she, but here the author is actually presenting three different like types of action or whatever you want to call it: wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And oftentimes you hear a lot of people, they try to separate all that. Is it the same?
I think they all tie in together at some point.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They have to.
Could this be a linguistic, foreshadowing of the Trinity?
Which one's which?
Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge.
No, I know, but which is assigned to which? You know what I mean.
Well, I'm gonna say since knowledge is the foundation for wisdom, knowledge would be God, the Father, wisdom would be Christ, and understanding would be the Spirit. I mean, that's definitely just theoretical. I mean, that's.
Well, I was gonna say I'm gonna call up Mr. Tim Keller and see what he has to say about your little.
But I just thought it's kind of cool how they lumped it together like that, and and he mentions the earth, the heavens and the waters, and he's bringing in the whole triunity of creation as well. So not only is he bringing in the whole understanding and the wisdom of God, but he's talking about the entirety of creation.
Did you doodle that?
Actually, I didn't. I do have a 1, 2, 3 beside it, though.
Oh, okay.
And a Trinity scratched right there, but that's all I had right there.
That is a really good way to look at it, because I mean, now that you mention it, like I can see it, but I wouldn't have picked that out. Like maybe before, or like I just didn't see it this time.
And it's also interesting that water and heaven in Hebrew is always plural. There's no singular for that. Just interesting. And I hear an alarm going off, but that is not me, because my van does not have an alarm.
What the heck?
I don't know. But in verse 21,
Weird.
in verse 21, he starts this one off as my son as well. And I like to point out another interesting
Your
little
son, Caleb, he's
observation.
Right
Yeah, listen up, my son. Preserve sound judgment and discernment. Do not let them out of your sight. So don't turn to that tablet again. You can't let it out of your sight. Like he put his headphones on.
Yeah,
I don't know if he's ignoring me. Or if
that's sound judgment.
sound.
I hear you.
He starts this whole chapter off with my son. Don't forget my teaching, and in the next section, that is that he starts off in verse 11, which I told you how he separated it off with the pay. He starts off, my son, do not despise the Lord's discipline. And here in verse 21, again, he's going to wrap up this chapter, even though this is a longer section in the next part. He talks about, my son, preserve sound judgment. So you go from listening and don't forget the teaching. Don't reject the Lord's discipline, because once you go from moving on from teaching, I oftentimes fail to apply it, so I need a little bit of discipline.
Yeah. Well.
And then in the end, you preserve sound judgment, discernment, so that you went from the teaching to the listening to God, and then drawing out the understanding from that. And then I believe the rest of the chapter is bringing out the unethical mindset about how we interact in this world.
Well, there's no other way to gain wisdom either, unless you take your lumps. Like you're gonna I guess it would be wise to listen to somebody that's had the experience.
I would say it'd be more wise to listen before.
But nobody ever does that.
Yeah.
Like I tried this, I did that. You want to experience because you are unwise, and that's how you gain wisdom.
Yeah, we all can gain a little bit more wisdom, and it seems like even as hard as you try to live out what you've learned in the beginning, even though you don't intentionally set out to not or to defy that, you turn around one day and you're like, wow, I did exactly what I said I wasn't going to do. Well, and then you have to take your lumps again.
And then you learn another lesson.
Yeah. But he says, my son, preserve sound judgment and discernment. Do not let them out of your sight. They will be life for you, an ornament to grace your neck. What speaks to you in that?
So that means when you get scars, you show them off.
You get scars?
Yeah, you want to see mine?
I would respectfully decline. But
isn't that what it means? I got into a knife fight back in '83, and I got this one here from a shark bite.
Well, but imagine how awesome that would be if everybody had that kind of personal testimony about spreading the gospel. And
that's what I'm saying. Isn't that what it means?
Well, but this about sound judgment and discernment, don't let them out of your sight.
No, the ornament of grace around your neck. Does that mean you're just gray hair?
No, I would liken this to.
What if you got a neck beard? and it's gray.
A neck beard?
Yeah, where your beard grows in
Well,
your neck.
like me?
Yeah, it's a neck beard.
Oh, is that what you think?
Well, I mean, it's not really. It's a kind of an ornament, I guess.
I try to trim it up once in a while. But anyhow, no, I think of just as you would want to wear fine jewelry and have something that people recognize or see right off the bat when they meet you, that what they should recognize and know about you, it shouldn't be just as what Peter says about how women should be not worried about the outward adornment, but be recognized by the quiet spirit inside, which is pleasing to the Lord.
Yeah,
But it shouldn't be the outward adornment. What should be recognized is that they know that, hey, I can go to that guy and talk to him about something because he's gonna give me sound advice. He's gonna give me godly advice.
Well, I know, like, that's a hard one though, because I can see visually that you have a neck beard. Like, that would be something that I see. Where if you're wise, you don't really see that.
I don't know, but I do think that the Spirit does commune. That if you're around somebody that is really walking in the Spirit, I think you can sense that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I guess you're right.
I think that's it's letting the inward beauty and wisdom be guide, or let the Spirit guide you into that, and then if you're seeking that, I think it's going to be leading you to that. But
I see.
Let's move on. We're actually making some good ground, I think. We are in verse 22.
We still got so much to go.
Wow, look at that. Look, that's 22 verses. Even though we just started in verse 13, we are making good ground. You got to think of it positively that way.
Then you will go on your way in safety, and your foot will not stumble. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. And when you lie down, your sleep will be sweet.
And have no fear of sudden disaster or the ruin that overtakes the wicked, for the Lord will be your confidence, and he will keep your foot from being snared.
See, I'm trying to break it up to where, like, is that all where your doodle stops?
No, I actually, that is where that next doodle stops, sort of.
Well, back on that part then. What do you have for that?
Well, the only thing I wanted to bring out about this that it is actually, to me, picturing an awesome way that I would love to be able to actually say that. Yeah, sleep would be awesome at times because I really do not get all that much,
But it's sweet when you do, right?
Oh, it is very sweet. Actually, I don't know because I'm dead to the world, and and then my wife fusses at me because I don't hear the alarm clock either, and so
I think I'm going to give Caleb that Thor hammer to give to Angie to beat you with.
When I don't listen to the alarm clock, she can hit me.
You in the head.
Well, she'd definitely be worthy of lifting the Thor hammer. But anyhow, but this picture is something that I would love to be able to say that I experience all the time, but I don't. But sweet sleep, not being afraid, not being anxious sometimes, feeling like you're carrying the weight of the world. But when you're truly trusting in the Lord and letting Him actually guide you, this does happen, and I can attest to that. It's when you try to step out of that, that you sort of find yourself not sleeping as well, and there's other reasons why you don't sleep well. But I mean, me personally, I know that the biggest reason why I don't sleep well when I try to sleep is because I probably need to be talking with the Lord.
Well, did you sleep well when you were at Stumpy Point?
Yeah, I slept fine. I didn't get much sleep there either.
What the heck was that?
Somebody has messed up all the notifications on my phone. I keep trying to change them, and then some new ring always happens. Oh, and by the way, at one time it was a screaming goat.
Oh, I wonder how that happened.
Yeah, I don't know, but my wife Angie, she was like so frustrated with that phone. She was almost ready to hit me with it.
Because of the goat?
Yes, she did not like that thing.
Maybe I should give her that hammer then. You'll learn a lesson and get wisdom.
But the big thing from this is that, just as he promises in Isaiah and elsewhere, that the one whose mind is steadfast in the Lord, he keeps at peace. And it's hard to stay continually walking in the Spirit all the time. So everybody is going to have these times when they don't experience what he is typifying right here. But I think this is something that we should all be striving for, at least.
What about have no fear of sudden disaster or the ruin that overtakes the wicked. Does that mean you shouldn't be concerned when a hurricane or a typhoon or
No, it doesn't say
tornado?
concern. No, he's saying you don't have to fear it. You know, when stuff like that happens, I don't think we should be sitting around
Concern and fear.
filled with anxiety about, oh, woe's me, and like all this other stuff in the world, because we know that no matter what happens, God is in control. And like Paul said, I'm sorry, Paul, that Job said, though he slay me, yet I will trust in him. And when we are in that and that's what I think he's speaking of, that the Lord is our confidence. When we're confident in ourselves, when we're esteeming ourselves, I think we are walking on some shaky ground, because the only sure thing that can either bring happiness, confidence, joy, yeah, all of that. You can name the rest of the fruit of the Spirit too, but the only thing that can really truly bring that to a depth that can satisfy us will be God. And we have to constantly try to turn to him, and like what Jesus said, deny ourselves, take up a cross, and follow him. But a lot of times we find ourselves trying to get off that cross and cater to a little bit of ourself once in a while.
Never. Well, I mean, I can't speak from my experience that way.
Is that because you always go on mission trips and I always go on mud runs?
I wasn't going to go there.
But the next few verses, 27 through 32, I have a little note off to the side. This is where I think he almost got into this this don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And I wrote down on the side, this is where he gets into ethical living. And I actually, I don't know how exact this is, but my little doodles on the next sections or the next verses, when I read this, I don't know what comes to your mind. Actually, before I say what came to my mind.
Oh my goodness! Why you got to put me on the spot?
Yeah, what came to your mind as you read this section of verses right here?
Don't do these things.
Yeah. Well, besides, don't do them. Like do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it is in your power to act. Do not say to your neighbor, "Come back later. I'll give it to you tomorrow," when you have it with you. Do not plot harm against your neighbor who lives trustfully near you. Do not accuse a man for no reason when he has done you no harm. Do not envy a violent man or choose any of his ways. For the Lord detests the perverse man, but takes the upright into his confidence.
So this is like the extra. You got your 10 commandments. This is like 11 through 16. 16?
There's only 5 there.
Oh, 15. Sorry.
Yeah, because verse 32 isn't a commandment. He's just reminding you, hey, don't do all this stuff because the Lord detests the wicked and lifts up the humble.
Well, you're talking about like what I think about it. It's all topical. Like I didn't really dive too deep into any of it. I mean, it's right there on the surface.
Yeah, they pretty much say what they say.
Right.
But when I read it, the 10 Commandments did come to mind, and the reason why is because to me this does sound like an ethical way of living, and there are 5 commands in the Old Testament, or 5 commands in the Decalogue, that are for ethical living, as in relation to man. Well, there's 6 really, because number 5 is honor your father and your mother, but starting after the 5th command, 6 through 10. I wrote little notes beside each one of these, and I likened them to each one. And the first one, I was sort of was questioning myself, like, is that kind of a stretch? Because
explain yourself.
Do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it is in your power to act. And I put a little note outside. Romans 13, 7 through 8 said, if you owe honor, give honor. If you owe respect, give respect. If you owe all this money, give money, whatever. And let no debt remain outstanding but the debt of love. But I put Exodus 20:14 as my go back to verse for that verse right here, verse 27, and that one is do not commit adultery. And
wait. How are you going to connect those dots?
That's why I said I wonder if I was stretching it. I don't really believe I'm stretching it though, because
good from those to whom it is due when you're.
When it is in with you. I know I'm going to tie this in together because like I said, if it good doesn't have to be, like something physical. It could be respect. It could be honor. It could be duty. It could be whatever.
Right.
And Israel was all the time being likened to an adulteress because of their unfaithfulness to God, by not giving him their tithe, by not giving him the respect, by not giving them the honor.
Oh.
And I tied that to that because what he's pointing out here is that even in that commandment, don't commit adultery, what are you doing when you're committing adultery?
Withholding good from those whom it is due.
Exactly. You're withholding good from your spouse because you are taking from her which is hers. You know, it might be a stretch, man.
The way that your brain works needs to be studied.
Moving on.
It makes sense. Like, it totally does.
It's just different way of thinking.
But that is completely different than how I would have taken it. But it does make sense.
And it says, "Do not say to your neighbor, 'Come back later, and I'll give it to you tomorrow,' when you have it with you now."
And that's like the verse that makes me think that it wouldn't be as adulterous.
Well, that's not the. I don't. That's not. The
I know,
one.
but like, if you read them all, like if you zoom out when you're reading all of it, like if you just pick that verse out.
I zoom out and I see the last 5 commandments.
Right.
And what he's doing in Proverbs is because this is the wisdom. We're trying to gain or draw out understanding.
Right.
And what he's doing is showing you how to apply, this understanding of God to your life, which is what ethics is.
Right.
And this one, do not say to your neighbor, 'Come back later, I'll give it to you tomorrow,' when it is with you now, or when you now have it with you. I wrote down to the side Exodus 20:15, and that's don't steal. Because when you withhold something, or you take something, or you deprive somebody of something, you're actually robbing them. You're taking something from them, or you're withholding it from them when it should be theirs. If it's with you to give, God has blessed you with that to give somebody.
Well, in my head, I will paint the picture of, Steve, my neighbor, came over to get his hatchet back, and I said, "I'll just give it to you tomorrow." Like, that's all I got, and you're like talking about.
He said, "Don't do it."
Yeah, don't do that. Then you're talking.
What if he needed that hatchet today, and now he had to go buy another one, in which you essentially just took money out of his hand?
Well, I know, like I was told by the Lord in Proverbs 3 not to do that, so that's why I won't do it no more. But you have some grand.
Well, let's see how I tie the rest of this together.
All right, keep going.
Do not plot harm against your neighbor who lives trustfully near you. And you might can guess which one I tied to that one.
What, throw the hatchet at your neighbor? What, go ahead.
Yeah, when he comes and asks for it, I'm not giving it to you and throw it at him as he's walking away. No, Exodus 20:13, don't murder.
Right.
And, Jesus likens murder to not only the physical act, but, hating or despising somebody in your heart. And this is plotting harm against your neighbor who's trustfully living near you. And that's exactly what I think he's painting here, is this act that even in the Old Testament, to me it's amazing that they were already thinking so deep about the law and Torah that oftentimes I think we neglect to even try to go that deep in today's time.
Was that a jab at me?
No, not you. In general, it's just like... we have this stuff being told to us now.
It's
but
a lazy.
wow,
it's like a lazy wisdom where you're not going to get. Is that? I don't know. Because you have to work. I mean, everything in this book says that you have to. If it costs you everything, you get it.
You really have to do it.
And we'll sit and we'll listen to somebody basically tell us how it is without doing any legwork or without studying any of it. Or
I guess that is lazy Christianity.
And then you got other people that overanalyze it and say that it's about. Never mind.
Well, I don't know. I think it's good to go with. And what I was getting at was when Christ was walking the earth, he's saying, well, you heard it said, don't murder, but I tell you that if you hate a brother in your heart, you've already done it.
Right.
And it's like, wow, that was like a revolutionary way of thinking. But was it really? Was he bringing up a revolutionary way of thinking, or was he just pointing like back to Proverbs about how we should have been thinking all along? I sort of don't. I've never thought about it that way.
Does most of the time when he aims to do that, he'll quote the actual scripture itself anyway.
Yeah.
But that thread runs through all of it anyway. So.
And then it says, don't accuse a man for no reason when he has done you no harm. And Exodus 20:16, don't bear false witness.
He stole my Coke out of the fridge. I saw him do it.
Or he drunk all of the Cokes and didn't save me one. Which we still have to get some.
Oh, boy.
Anyhow, that's what I tied it that one. And then do not envy a violent man or choose any of his ways. And I put Exodus 20:17 about not coveting your neighbor's things or possessions, because a lot of times we see these people who are so prosperous and all that, and they tend to be like, they're the ones that they get angry easy in line. They're like abrupt with people and all that. And it's like, wow, maybe that's how they get their way. Maybe because they cuss out the guy on the telephone on the other end, and they get the better deal of the house package, like the telephone and all that stuff. And I think that's what it is. Don't covet. Don't look around you and see what other people have and think, well, I should be having that.
Well, so read 31 to me again.
31?
What you have.
Do not envy a violent man or choose any of his ways.
Okay, so the picture in my head from that is like violence, guns, army, military.
Really?
I mean, it's violent, right?
Well, that's violent, but that's
necessary.
Well, it could be speaking of that, but that's not the only thing that word violent can speak to.
Do not envy the violent or choose any of their ways. So when every boy in America, that's what they do is play army. But that essentially that's violence, right? To go and shoot another man is violent.
Well, that's violent, but I don't necessarily think that's it's sort of like saying the same thing that you can't lump all killing together with murder.
Well, I know that too, but
so all forms of violence in a larger umbrella isn't necessarily a bad or wrong form of violence in whatever context it's in, because certain times you have to take up arms, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, and they may be drawn to that excitement, but they're not drawn to that just because they're not just shooting up people, they're shooting up bad guys, and it's good against evil. And it's sort of like what is the context that you're training them to be thinking about and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot more into it.
Well, I mean, it's not even like you train them, like it just kind of happens.
Natural.
Yeah, for a boy to be, play army and tie people up and stab them with a rubber knife,
or like not. I think it's just human nature, because Sarah used to rip off Barbie doll heads all the time. But anyhow, but I think that even if it's a loose tie, that what he's doing here is because he's tying wisdom into everyday life. He's showing you the principles of God's law fit beautifully into an everyday lifestyle that we should be considering more. We should be writing them upon the tablets of our heart more so than just dismissing it as Old Testament. Is what I thought. Anyhow.
Well, for the Lord detests the perverse, but takes the upright into his confidence. The Lord's curse is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the home of the righteous. He mocks proud mockers, but shows favor to the humble and oppressed. The wise inherit honor, but fools get only shame.
That honor and all that stuff, we have to also keep in mind that he's not speaking of something that is instantaneous or spontaneous. And it's like, as soon as you act in a wise way, you're going to be honored. It's not like a microwave society that we're used to. It's something that we know because of living in wisdom. We know that the benefits from, just like a tree that wisdom is likened to.
It sprouts and it grows. And
you have to wait for it. You have to nurture it. You have to care for it. And eventually it's going to be able to take care of you. And that's exactly what he's talking about, the honor, because, looking forward to it in your life, a wise man sees adversity and prepares for it.
Should you seek honor or just wisdom?
Well, I think you should seek wisdom.
Should you seek honorable wisdom?
I think you should seek wisdom and let God honor you if he chooses. Because he also promised in the New Testament that he who humbles himself before the Lord will raise up. The Lord will exalt. And that's in his time, that's in his way. And it may not be monetary, it may not be even in this world. It could be in the life to come. Just as what we mentioned about the definition of happiness in 1800 was with the understanding or the idea that whoever was reading that understood that you're not going to achieve true happiness in this world.
Right. What about taking a little comfort in he mocks proud mockers? Everybody's going to get their due, right?
Yeah, everybody. What goes around comes around.
And sometimes it's hard to hold it in when you do get mocked. But
yeah, that was a pretty good chapter there, chapter 3.
yeah, it only took us 3 years to get through, but we did it, folks.
It may have seemed like that, but we're trying to move on as quickly as we can. But I don't want to move on at such a fast pace that we miss something.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to draw if it comes to our mind. Yeah. I
want to cover
every
each
doodle is going to be discussed.
Every doodle discussed here.
So we might need to start doing this more frequently, so I'll have less time to doodle. But
we did good as far as time. I mean, we had a whole hour just on like half a chapter. So
yeah.
But that's good though.
The other section. There's a lot in chapter 3, and the way this is going is that he's bringing up more in-depth arguments to support his claim that we should be pursuing wisdom. In chapters 1 and coming up in this chapter 3, he is finalizing his argument that this is what we should be pursuing. And now in the next few chapters, he's going to be bringing up more in-depth reasoning behind that, or justification for why we should, as in
get wisdom at any cost.
No, though it costs you all you have, get wisdom. Not at any cost, just what you have.
Well, no matter what it takes, get wisdom.
Yes. But he's going to be talking about, he's going to be likening it to adultery and the adulteress, or actually he's going to be contrasting it with adultery and adulteress, and folly, and bringing up, like a good sound argument is bringing up both sides, and that's what he's going to be doing. And yeah, it should be.
Is that how your podcast went last week? Back and forth, back and forth? Back and forth?
I think it
like
just it went forward and
no. Well, so you say something, then you play devil's advocate on yourself.
No.
That's what you should do. You just said you want to look at all
the angles.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I just threw it out there. So maybe I was hoping you would go on there and post a comment.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, but I hope you're enjoying it so far. We are just finished up chapter 3 in Proverbs, and the next time we get together, we'll be diving into chapter 4.
Get wisdom at any cost.
We hope that is your mantra. I guess that was the right choice of words.
Oh boy!
But anyhow, you've been. I am your host, James Beasley, and here with finally in like almost a month, it seems like, but not quite a week.
Come on.
Just over a week.
Josh Bunner.
Yeah. But you've been listening to the WordLover podcast.
See you next
God
time.
bless.
You put this love in my, you put this love in my, you put this love in my heart. I found it hard to believe someone like you cared for me. You put this love in my heart. I tried but could not refuse. You gave me no time to choose. You put this love in my heart. I wanna know where the bad feelings go when I'm depressed and I get down so low, and then I see you coming to me, and it's alright. You put this love in my, you put this love in my, you put this love in my heart.
Feeling now?
Feeling okay.
All right. I just give you fair warning. You are on live radio. Not really, but we have you running through a podcast system
That's neat.
see, you thought you were going to weasel out of being a contributor.
Say something.
You sound overjoyed.
Get him to talk about his poop experience the
Yes.
last couple days.
Let
So we
us
can broadcast
give us
it.
about a rundown about your
A rundown.
Your
Good choice of
rundown.
words.
What do you want now?